You know, when it comes to making spoons, I've only made a few. And I really have zero idea what I'm doing. Watched a couple of YouTube videos, followed a couple spoon makers on Instagram. By the way, if you haven't followed us on Instagram, you can find us. It's Forgotten Skillz with a Z. So I watched a couple of videos and decided that it was something I wanted to try, and I'm actually really digging it. You know, being stuck inside so much lately, trying to run a few different businesses and times that are not really conducive to business. It's kind of therapeutic. And there's something really to be said for figuring stuff out. You know, I make a lot of mistakes. Like I said, I don't know what I'm doing, but there's joy in it, and it gives me a lot of peace. Plus, it was justification to buy a new tomahawk, which I've always wanted. So this is actually a piece of oak that blew down. Neighbors had cut up, and I stole a piece for crafting on. And then this is a piece of cherry that blew down out in my driveway, windstorm a couple weeks ago. So I've been making some spoons out of it, and they all kind of start this same way, just with taking away some and getting an idea of what I want that bad boy to look like. So I'm guessing that I'm going to make a ladle out of this one. One thing I did learn is that when you have bends like this, especially, you know, there's a small branch coming in here, that the fibers cross hatch really nicely in there. Makes it a hump to carve, but they come out really nice. You know, one thing I've been learning too is to not be fearful to take too much action. You know, can't take whole hunks off and expect a spoon to appear out of nowhere, but at the same time, trying to make a spoon right from the beginning with perfection, it just doesn't work. You gotta take some massive actions and see where things go. Eventually your vision clarifies as to what you'd like to make, and gotta work with what the branch gives you too. You know, just like the times now, we could all say whether we want to be open, be closed, doesn't really matter. It is what it is. We gotta function within what's given to us. It's kind of where success is found, you know. By the way, if anybody's done this and you got some tips for me, I'll be more than happy to take them. One thing that I dig about the learning experience is that it connects us to other people too. So one of the reasons I love cherry is it's got this smoothness to it. It's like carving butter, really hard butter, the kind you just took out of the refrigerator because you forgot about it. Mom's coming over, and you gotta worry about how to soften that butter without melting it, right? I don't know how that made it into the conversation, but there you are. So we got some knots and inclusions in here that I'll see how deep they go. Really, I'm going to be working on the front half of that. I just like to dig in a little bit before I start shredding down the log. Like I said, I'm not super good at it, and it just helps me see what I'm doing and where I'm going to go with it. So now I just hope that that doesn't go too far through that elbow. And that'll be that. Alright, so let's debark this a little bit, see what we got. The cherry just feels nice in the hand. Not really sure what kind of cherry it is. There's a few different varieties in the landscape around here. So we got a little something there, but that front half looks pretty clear. noticed that I tend to make my spoons a little short. So with this one, I'm going to try to lengthen out that handle a little bit. And it's a little big right now, but I'm going to try to keep as much of that length as I can. Put the bowl right here. So I'm going to start whacking at this. I'll be back in a little bit, and you can see some progress. Alright, so a couple minutes of trimming and skinning a little bit here. And I think it's telling me that it does like the idea of being a ladle. So one tip that I did pick up was my bowl for the spoon is going to be about here. And what I'm going to do is trim this down to a handhold, which will give me a little bit of leverage as I start to work into the bowl and do some of the detail. And then somewhere more towards the end of the process, I'll take that front off and round it out. So this front section here is just going to be a handhold. You know, it'll probably come up to the tip of the bowl right about there, where it starts to, I don't know if you can see from the side there, come a little closer. It starts to swoop up a little bit right here. That'll probably be my leading edge right there on the spoon. So I'll get a nice ladle. Maybe I'll even get to taste something that gets cooked in the kitchen. We'll practice scooping. All right, I'm gonna do a little more trimming, see where we can get. All right, so it's getting a little more ladly now. I started carving on that back side, and just about through the pith. You carved it out at the end. You can just kind of see that red line. It's going down right through the middle there. I got to get to the other side of that. That pith has never worked out well for me, and from what I've read, I want to be all on one side of that anyway. So as I continue to shape this, and I'll do some more with the axe before I switch to the knives. As I continue to shape this, I'm going to get just below that line, which will really take a lot off of this handle and start to narrow it down to something besides a shillelagh, which I could stop now and put a hurting, but I want to go for the nourishing angle, so I'm going to keep going. I've got my bowl kind of shaping down a little bit, so I'll be holding here. I'll narrow that down a little, and that will be the bowl of my ladle. So it's got a nice curve that was naturally in that wood. I'm going to try to preserve that as much as possible. All right, so I'm about 25 minutes in or so, starting to smooth out the surface that'll be my bowl. You can start to see it's taking spoon shape now, for real. There's just a little bit of that pith left. It'll probably come out as I finish shaping, but up in the handle, I don't think it'll be as important. I found that when it's in the bowl, it'll push out and put a hole in your spoon and make it a strainer, I guess. But up in the handle, it'll probably just add a little color if it ends up staying. I don't think so, because I really want to maximize this curve as much as possible, just to give it a more ergonomic design. And I'll probably flatten out where this bowl comes in as well, just to make it a little more scoopy. But you can definitely start to see what the log wants to be. I love working with cherry. It's pretty cool because when you first skin it, it's almost a yellow white. Looks like a piece of alabaster. And then as you work it, and I guess it's probably oxidizing. I don't know the science behind it, but it turns orange fairly quickly, and then it starts to deepen. You know, this area where I haven't touched in a couple minutes now, starts to deepen into these reds. And you know, when you put a finish on it, which I just use a food grade mineral oil, it really brings that out and highlights some of the different colors. Sometimes I'll let it, you can kind of see here, I'll let it kind of model a little bit, the different areas of the wood. And then I'll sand very lightly over that just to smooth it out, but to keep some of that modeling. And I think it looks really nice when it's done. But I'm just going to keep chipping away. I know some guys can finish a spoon with just an axe. I'm not at that skill level, so I'll be switching over to the knife pretty soon. But I think I could get a little more off of this. By the way, I just cleaned this deck for Mother's Day, so I think I undid everything I did. All right, let's see what else I can do here for a little bit. it's a little early for eyeballing final lines, but I like to kind of get an idea, even as I'm taking off the rough stock, as to where I'm going. Like I said, I'm not super good at this, so it just kind of guides me a little bit. You know, one thing I figured out is that, especially not being very adept with the cutting implements, very new at it, is that much like on the rifle range, if you want to change your point of aim, you change your stance before you start trying to move that firearm around. I find it much easier that if I'm not hitting in the right spot, instead of trying to move the cutting implement, I'll move the wood where my natural stroke is. And it seems to help me make sure that those strikes are at least close to where I want them. They don't always go where I want them, but I guess that's a practice thing, right? So I've got a little swoop at the end, which, while aesthetically pleasing, isn't very functional. If I'm scooping a liquid, it's only going to hold it to the lowest point of that bowl. So I'm going to take a little bit of that swoop out of there. I like it, but form ever follows function, right? That's a little bit better, and the rest we can smooth down once we get into our knife shaping phase here. This will probably all come down. Like I said, I'm not super good with the axe, so I came in a little tight here and rounded over this edge. So I'll probably take this whole thing down to match pretty closely. I don't mind having a little swoop on it. So I'll probably come down pretty close to match that, which means I got a little more wood to take off of there. Faithful hound makes an appearance. Hey, Annabeth. What's up, Papa? You want to sniff? You approve? And she says I got to take a little more rough. You might want to watch your snoot, young lady. Alright, so we're down to about my level of ability with the axe. So I'm going to be switching over. Oh, Papa. I'm going to be switching over to the knives. I'm just going to move that out of the way for the moment. I just have a basic set of knives. Got it on Amazon. I don't even know if it's a brand name. I'm sure as I get better at this, I'll start picking up some new toys. But it's got a basic Sloyd knife. It's got my hook knife for doing the bowl. It's got a detail knife for if I was going to do any detailed carving. And it's got a cheap leather strap with some sharpening or honing resin in there. Mostly though, I know some people like to start with their bowl first. I like to get it down so I can kind of visualize the shape a little bit first. So I'm just going to start removing some material with this knife, smoothing out some of these chop marks, a couple spots where maybe I cut a little deep, and then abandoned it because it was starting to crack a little bit. So I'll really start shaping this down into, I guess, the second draft. So if this is my rough draft, I'm going to start taking this down to my second draft here. All right, let's see what we can do. I'm just going to start by taking off all the chunks just so I don't get any splinters. And that'll also help me smooth out my shape a little bit and see what's what to cut, what to leave. I'll just work my way down this handle. Like I said, I know there's guys that do this a lot faster and a lot better. But you know, for me, it's just a little therapy. So I'm not looking for any particular shape. I just want. What are you eating back there? The dog is eating my strawberries. What are you doing? Man, hard to get good help these days. I know, Papa. You love me anyway, right? I also get to see my mistakes now. Like right in there, that's pretty deep. I'll have to work on smoothing that down a little. So I'm just making sure that I keep the blade in safe direction. My first few spoons were sacrifices, both in workmanship and in blood donation. So I learned how to work the knife a little bit. And I just keep half an eye and make sure I'm not cutting too deeply on any one spot as I smooth. If there's any areas that are already a little thick that maybe I need to take down, take that into consideration. But so you really see some of that color modeling that's going on. It's going to look really nice when it's done. Let's see. I went a little deep in the wrong direction right here, so let's see if it's fixable. I guess everything's fixable. See, if I take this handle down, I'm going to do most of my carving on this back side until I get down to the ends, and then I'll do a little more up on the top side. So I'll probably follow a curve that comes right through this bowl, up peaks at the top, and then down. It didn't end up as a true ladle shape, which would have had that handle a little higher, but we still want to make a nice scooper out of it. Let's see what I did down here. Posted some of my stuff. You know, whole purpose of Forgotten Skillz is not to necessarily teach anybody anything, but to rediscover. You know, for us, it's all about the journey, not necessarily about the destination, though the destinations are pretty cool. And one of the things I had happen was a local museum said that don't throw away my mess ups because they might be interested in putting them in display. And I said, but they are really ugly. Half of them have holes because I was using the wrong parts of the wood or whatever. And I said it didn't really matter because it shows probably exactly what our ancestors would have worked with, because there weren't always necessarily spoon artists. Like some of the guys I follow on Instagram are definitely artists. They said it would have been something that they needed a meal. While they were waiting for it to cook, or for the fish to bite, or you know, for the trap lines to catch something, they would have carved a rudimentary spoon. So they wanted, they said they'd be interested in maybe displaying some of the castaway pieces as examples of some of the rougher artifacts, which I thought was pretty cool. I don't know if I'd necessarily buy it once they see it in person, but alright, so I came in a little tight here. We'll just smooth that out a little. So this area of transition right here from handle to bowl is one that's been giving me a bit of a learning curve here. You know, being able to guide the knife without skipping off on one angle or digging in the grain on the other side. So I'm trying to do most of my shaping while I'm still in this rough phase. And that way, when I get down to the fine stuff, I don't have to do too much and worry as much about slipping. Because it'll already kind of be there. Oh, doggy, you're so pitiful. I think I might take a little more off the back there. Let's see if we can do that. You know, it's funny. I had to learn how to take more with the axe. I was being very hesitant about chopping for fear of damaging the wood. And with the knife, sometimes I had to learn, gotta take less. A little duality of life there. And sometimes you try to take too much with the knife and it just splits. You know, nothing really comes off, but the damage is done. And I guess life is the same way, right? Sometimes you gotta be bold. Ask that girl to dance. Ask for that promotion. Ask that man to marry you. But then sometimes you gotta have a little finesse about how you go about things. Sometimes blurting is romantic. Sometimes it's an opportunity to put that foot way far down your throat. That is something I am definitely good at. Alright, so we're about, let's see, 2 hours or so in. Working on the knife, about ready for a resharpen. But we've got some lines. I've got the shape of my bowl. Nice simple shape. I ended up with a knot in the handle. I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but I had to shorten up my handle a little bit. It just wasn't working really well, smoothing out. And while I could run inside and get the folding saw that I have in my bushcraft kit and still feel like I'm being kind of traditional, I decided just to see what I could do about whittling it down. I'm going to try to maintain a little flare at the end with a little, almost like a counterweight or a hand rest, so it'll wrap around there. So this end piece will be gone. And I'll just have a little something so you can put it there, maybe rest it on the corner of a pot, and see how it goes. So I'm going to try to just whittle that in there if I can. Loving this new stump. Wish it was a little bit taller. Maybe I'll put some feet on it. And just kind of getting that blade in there and using straight arm with some body weight. I don't want to use a lot of muscle. I'm just going to see what I can do here. I could always grab the tomahawk is right there next to me still. Might have to just to get past that knot. That's a good hard one. I don't want to bust my knuckles on the bark down on that stump either. Let's see if I can finesse this or if it's going to turn into a short-handled spoon. Let's see. Here's that knot. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the weight of the tomahawk. I'm just going to lay it into the cut I made. And instead of chopping at it, I'm just going to try to gently bounce that whole project. See if I can't keep the cut fairly localized. All right, looks like it's doing the trick. Yeah, just leave it pointy on one end and it could be a big fondue spoon. What if they had fondue back in the ancestors' time? I have to look up the history of that. My daughter loves it. I'm more of the chocolate fountain fondue kind of guy. Alright, I think I got that knot just about out of there. Alright. A little ragged on the edge, but I can clean that up pretty simply. And I broke it right at that point where the knot was. So I'll take out some of that debris, those ragged edges. I'll round that out, make it nice and comfortable. You know, the true test is when I hand it off, and if my other half likes the feel of it, it stays, and if not, well, worst case scenario, there's always the fire pit. But I try to improve on the design before I commit it to fire. Let's see. All right, so that's still a little rough, but now let's smooth this out a little bit here. This is just one of those times when you have a vision and sometimes something gets in your way, a little knot in the wood. It doesn't stop you from accomplishing your vision. You just sometimes have to take a little bit different way to do it. So my kung fu brother calls that skillful means. Anytime you gotta finagle things, adapt, maybe bend how things are supposed to be a little bit. Skillful means. Always adding a little tact in there. He's a very tactful dude. They've been taking martial arts together for, wow, 25 years this year? Man. I don't think they're going to believe that we're in our 30s anymore. We might have to adjust our fib. There's some skillful means. He is far older than I am. Far. I mean, I was around in the Stone Age. I don't even think they invented rocks when he was in school. Alright, so you get the general idea here. So I got that little bulb on the end. Kind of fits really nicely and leaves you the long handle. So if maybe you had to, I don't know, adjust the stove or something, you can hold on to that. I'm going to bring this handle down a little bit. It still feels a little clunky. And then I'll start working on the bowl, and I might change the shape a little bit. We'll see how that goes once I start playing with it a little bit. All right, I'll be back in just a bit with some more work on it. All right, so I got most of my shape. I still certainly have some refinement to do, but it's time to start seeing what's going to happen down here. Now, this is pretty close to the center of the log, and cherry's pretty hard to begin with. So this ought to be fun. So this is just a hook knife, sharpened on one side, and let's see how this does. My backup plan, of course, is to either use the tomahawk to maybe chip some of this out before I scoop it if it's too hard for this knife. This is not the best hook knife in the world. Or if I want to get really creative, I was also thinking about taking an ember and using the ember to burn out the bowl, which I'm sure would put some nice color on into the wood as well. But we'll see how this goes. This is usually where I cut myself, so if you're squeamish, I'll edit that out, don't worry. So one of the guys I follow on Instagram, yeah, this is some hard wood. One of the guys I follow on Instagram told me that very often one of the challenges with making the bowl is that we think we have to go far deeper than we actually do. And that many spoons aren't actually all that deep. This one I'll probably make a little deeper than normal. And then of course once we sand it, the edges will come down a little bit, so it'll shallow it up a little bit. I don't know, shallow a verb? Can I shallow something? I guess so. I can deepen something. Can I shallow in it? Alright, so the technique, and I'm sure my fingers are all in the way on the video here. The technique that I've found to work best for me, and like I said, I'm discovering as I go. A lot of the guys that I see have much better hook knives, either better blades, or they'll have chunkier or longer handles, so they're getting a lot of torque into them. This could probably actually stand to be sharpened a little bit as well, so maybe I'll do that next edit. What I've been doing, instead of where they can just dig in and rasp across it, I've been coming at a 45. Let me come a little closer to the camera. So instead of just scooping it like it's ice cream, I've been coming in at a 45, and as I scoop, I'm drawing. You know, as a spoon carver, I don't have a lot of experience, but as a martial artist, I know that a blade cuts best when the pressure is in two directions, so that I'm now not trying to chop wood out of here or gouge it out. I am slicing it like I would with a katana or a Chinese broadsword, and it makes these nice curls. Let me show you. It makes these, see if I can do it without chopping my fingers off on the camera. Makes these nice curls of wood. The downside that I found is that it leaves these gouge marks, which take a little extra work then later on in the smoothing process when it's time to sand things and actually make nice. But for removing a lot of material, this seems to be my technique of choice for the moment until somebody shows me a better one. And I post a lot of my stuff on Instagram, not so much to show off, but so that somebody will say, hey, I noticed you're doing that, let me show you a far easier way. And I noticed people have been very willing to share of their knowledge and their ability, so I'm thankful for that. Definitely has helped to the learning process along. And it's one of the goals of the whole Forgotten Skillz concept is sharing. You know, our ancestors shared person to person, master to apprentice, father to son, mother to daughter. And that's how knowledge was passed. There wasn't YouTube back then. So part of the whole goal of Forgotten Skillz is to give rebirth to that idea as well, that we are striving for self-reliance, self-sufficiency, but really the reason that we should become more self-sufficient or more self-reliant is because it does benefit the community. So it's not about going off into the woods and becoming a hermit, quite the opposite. It's about building community. You know, a bunch of us sitting around the fire, carving spoons, maybe having some of that homemade mead I made a couple years ago that's barely drinkable, but it certainly does the job. Or Bill, who you see on this channel every now and then, you know, my Kung Fu brother, has some stuff that he brings back from Kentucky. Hi.
Hi.
That it's supposed to be potable, but we use it to light the bonfire because it burns blue. You know, some kind of moonshine. So, and I'm going to keep working on this bowl. I'll be back in just a little bit. Alright, so last segment for today. I got the bowl roughed in. Probably take some off the nose here just to shorten up that scooper. We got the seal of approval on the little bulbous back end there. So what I'll do now is I'll just kind of give this a wipe down with some mineral oil just to make sure it doesn't split or crack as it dries. And I'll wrap it up in a plastic bag, stick it in the garage, and next time I get a chance to sit down, we'll finish it up. We'll probably take a little more off around the whole thing just to lighten it up. That's a pretty heavy implement so far. So I'm gonna wrap it up, clean up a little bit, and I smell some steak.